So I thought it was time that we go back to some of our European pictures. I was well ready for this one. Spiritual and water reflections. You're going to have to do a much more detailed drawing for this because we're going to be painting things separately. So your drawing should be pretty detailed. If it's not, you need to go back and get it detailed for your own good. A large flat, a number 10 round, and an 8 round today. We're also going to be using a 4 and a 2 round. We'll be using a rigger, a number 1 rigger, and the fine liner. We'll be using salt today. And along with the salt, we're going to be using a Kleenex or paper towel, something soft for blotting when we do our sky. So you want to have those things ready. We're going to begin by wetting the sky. You want to wet the sky area so that when we brush in our blues, it's going to be a nice, easy color for us. A nice, simple cerulean. You can mix that with a little bit of ultramarine if you would like to. And you can also put in a little bit of turquoise if you would like to. I didn't do a color review today ahead of time because we're going to be using so many different colors. We're basically using a lot of blues. We're using yellow, cad yellow. We're using our burnt umber. We're using burnt sienna. We're using yellow ochre, sap green, a lot of colors, black, our usual black, a little bit of red. So we're going to have all of our colors in use today. I made sure that my sky stayed nice and wet, and I left some white areas in my sky because I didn't want to fill it in totally. I wanted to have some areas of white. Because it's wet, it's going to be flowing into those areas anyway, but I wanted it to be a little bit more natural with a nice pure white versus a blotted white area. So I did leave some smaller areas that were just untouched with the paint. Move my paper around well so that it has a nice soft blend to it. Wipe off your table so you don't get a wash back. And then I used my paper towel to do a little bit of blotting. You can wipe your paper with it if you want more of like a straight line type of cloud. And then, of course, do some additional blotting if you want. Make sure your sky is nice and dry. And then we're going to go in and we're going to put in our basic colors on all of the buildings. There's a yellow building or a peachy colored building. There's a pink colored building. The church is a rust color, which is cad red, a little bit of burnt umber, and a little bit of yellow. You want a nice rusty color for that church. I added some additional color to the rust for that reddish building on the right. But of course, if you want, you can make those building colors really any color that you want. You don't have to stick with the colors in the picture. But you want to go ahead and put your colors in so that you have your base color on your buildings before we move on to the water. Now once you get all of your buildings colored in, the colors that you want, then we're going to start on the water. There's going to be a base color of watered down turquoise mixed with a little bit of sap green, just a very little bit, and a lot of water. That's going to be the base color in our water before we put the sap green over it. So that whole area of water, the whole canal, is going to have that wash of turquoise color on it. Now we're going to put some reflective areas in on the water where the boats are, both on the right-hand side and on the left-hand side. And when we put our sap color in is when we're going to blot out those reflective areas that are on the right. We don't have to blot out any areas on the left because those reflections are much, much darker. So it really doesn't matter. It's darker than the water. But the reflections on the right-hand side from the boats are lighter. So you want to have that paper towel ready when we put in our sap green color because we're going to be blotting out those little bits of reflective areas in the water. Not now. We're not doing it until we put the sap color in. Now there's a building behind those tree trunks that's next to the church, and I'm making that building color a little bit darker than the church color. So I just added a little bit of extra umber to it. You can add a little touch of black to it if you want to, but you want to make that just a little bit darker so that we don't have to go through the trouble of shadowing it later. I'm painting around my tree trunks because I want to have my tree trunks, painted in, and just in case it gets a little bit too dark, I don't want to have to worry that my tree trunks won't show up. Now when I'm done with that, I'm going to paint in my sidewalk color. And I want to paint both sides. I want to paint the sidewalk in a color, but I'm leaving that curb and the vertical part of the cement unpainted for now. So I'm just painting that top portion. I used umber mixed with a little bit of black. You could use straight umber if you want to. You could add a little bit of yellow ochre to it. You could use burnt sienna, whatever color you would like your pavement to be. And I'm throwing on just a very little bit of salt. Again, I am leaving the curb unpainted and the vertical drop unpainted right now. I'm just painting in the color of the sidewalk. Not the shadows. There's a real dark shadow on the left-hand side. I'm not worrying about that right now. I am just painting in the color to my sidewalk. When I'm done with that and it's nice and dry, I'm going to go back into the foreground of my canal water. And I'm going to put on another wash just in some rippled lines of very watered down turquoise, same color, but I want my water there that doesn't have any sap color to it to not be just a flat turquoise. I want it to have some lines through it that kind of show the movement of the water. It's not fast movement. It's just almost like it's not moving, but I want some some movement to the water a little bit, so the only way to show that is to drag through some horizontal ripple lines. same color. Dry it well, and then I'm going to start to put in some of the detail on my boats. Just follow your picture. Some of the boats have turquoise on them. Some of them have red, white, and blue. A couple of them just have ultramarine blue. I'm not talking about any of the shadowing. I am only talking about coloring. You can put some of the shadowing on the sides of the boats, but you want to get your detail in also so that you know where each boat is. There's no confusion. We want to get all of these basics done before we go in and start doing a lot of detail. The vertical drop on the sidewalk, we're going to dry brush vertically. So you want to make sure when you dry brush, you are going straight up and down. You don't want this drop to look like it's at an angle. You want it to look like it's a straight vertical drop. So I'm using the color of my sidewalk as well as a little bit of sap green to make it look like it has some algae to it. And I am just vertically dry brushing all the way down until you really can't see the detail anymore, and then I will just paint it in solid. And you're going to be doing that on both sides. So that vertical drop from the sidewalk down to the water is going to be dry brushed. Anytime you have a little bit of time while things are drying, you can continue to add more detail to those boats. Because then we're going to move up and we're going to start doing some detail in the buildings, coloring in the windows, that type of thing, adding drain pipes, adding, roof colors. But anytime you have a little bit of spare time, that you're waiting for something to dry or you're waiting to start something that's going to take you a little bit more time, then you can do some of your details with your boats. Now you want to mix a nice puddle of this sap color that's going to go over your turquoise. I mixed sap, a little bit of black, and a little bit of indigo. And that's the color that I am going to wash in over a good part of the canal. It looks like an upside down Christmas tree, so I'm starting just with some little horizontal lines, almost the shape of a Christmas tree, until I get about a third of the way back of my canal. And then it will be filled in solid. You're also going to be doing that same type of little bits of lines here and there on the right side along the vertical drop. But just follow your picture. You'll see exactly where you need to do that. And for part of it, especially the side parts, it's just short broken lines. It's not a solid tree color until you get almost to the bottom of your Christmas tree shape. So it's going to be short lines, very much looking like a Christmas tree, an upside down Christmas tree, until you get to almost like the bottom of what looks like your Christmas tree. And then that color will be filled in solid the rest of the canal, all the way back around your boats. This is the time now that when we color around the boats on the right, we're going to blot out a little bit of that sap green to be the reflective area in the water for the boats. So you want to think about that before you get up close to those boats, how you're going to do it. You want to make sure that it's nice and wet. You want to make sure you have a Kleenex handy, because you can't be running for your Kleenex once you put your paint down or it'll start drying. I put my paint down. I'm going to get just a little piece of Kleenex and I'm going to blot out almost like a little triangle. And that's going to be my reflection in the water from that boat. Then I'll continue on until I get to the next boat. And these are the ones on the right. And then I'll be blotting out that reflection. The last boat, which I have painted as a turquoise boat, I'm not really blotting anything out, but I'm adding some turquoise to the green water. I have my green painted in now, so I'm going to again blot a little bit out on that second boat back, just along the side, because I want to make sure that I leave a little bit of the unpainted green. I don't want the green to show. I want more of the turquoise to show in that reflection. So I'm leaving that little bit of reflection where I blotted, and then I will continue all the way back. I'm adding a little bit of turquoise while it's wet on that boat, because my boat is going to be turquoise. Now, of course, don't do that if you have another color plan for your boat. You don't want to drop in turquoise if you're planning on painting your boat red. But whatever color you're painting that boat, you can put a little bit of that color in your green sappy water. So now you have your canal water pretty much done. We're going to be putting in a little bit of real watered down black to be reflective of those black darker areas of the vertical drop on the sidewalk farthest away from you. So once you get your green in, it should stay nice and wet so that you have time to do some things. It should stay nice and wet, but we're going to put in just a little bit of watered down black farthest away from us as a reflection in the water, very pale reflection from the darkness of the farthest away curb. The reflections on the left are much, much darker. So I mixed some black and some indigo, and I am painting in that reflection on the boat, the middle boat, only because my sap green is there and it's wet. I don't have to worry about getting my foreground boat reflection in because that paint is already dry. So it's not like I'm worried about getting it in time so it can have a softer edge. I don't need a softer edge on the boat that is closest to me. A little bit of a darker reflection just on the front part of these boat reflections. It doesn't go the whole way down because I want to keep that light reflection in the water. So it's only going to be on the front of that boat, a little bit on the back of the other boat, but not the sides. I don't want that dark color to be way out in the water on the sides, just a very little bit. Now the reflection in the water on this foreground boat, same thing, black and some indigo. I'm dry brushing the edge out, but I'm dry brushing it horizontally in the shape that I see in my picture. It goes all the way up to that other boat, and then it gets filled in. It's a nice dark color, black and indigo. Don't put your dark color away yet because I'm going to water it down a little bit. I'm going to drag some of that color through my sap green because it's still wet. So I want to have a little bit of reflective color to make it look like there's some other reflections in the water, not just those boats. So I'm going alongside the reflection, but then I'm going to go back and forth horizontally just to make it look nice and uneven, to make it look like that water has some movement, some ripples into it. And my green is still wet, so I'm painting in that curb a little bit darker in two of my sections, and those two sections will have a reflective color in my green water. That's the reflection I was talking about. You have that nice dark color. It's watered down. I'm just putting it on and then dragging my brush left to right. It's not real dark. I don't want it to be real evident, but I do want it to be there. It's just giving some additional reflections, excuse me, to the picture. Dry everything really well. And now I'm going in and I'm starting to paint in all of the windows. Starting to do detail now. My windows on the left-hand side are just black. Some of the windows don't go totally from top to bottom. Some I have the bottom and then I just lessen the intensity with some water. If you look at your picture, you'll see which windows get painted in totally or which windows only half. And you're going to go ahead and do all of your windows, both on the left and on the right. On the right, before I put a lot of the blacks in, I painted some of the woodwork, the framing around the woodwork. You can choose what color you would like for that. I used a very pale turquoise, but again, you can choose whatever you would like. To break up all of my detail that I have to do for my windows, I'm going to go ahead and put my trees in. There are 2 trees back there. Well, actually 3 in my picture. So I'm making my first tree with sap green mixed with a little bit of yellow, and then I'm going to be dropping in some sienna and a little bit of black to show depth in that tree, and I'm throwing on some salt. And then when that tree dries, I'm going to do my second tree with some sap mixed with some black. I will paint around my first tree, which is on the right, and I'll salt that one. And then the very last one is going to be sap and black also, but with water added to make it less intense. And I will just dry brush that from the tops of my other 2 trees. Take your time. No hurry to get this all done in just a couple hours, because this one is a nice one to do piece by piece. You can do one window and then not do another window until you do something else. You can keep going back and doing your detail work on this. There's not a whole lot now that you have to worry about working wet on wet or doing one thing before the other. You can work it piecemeal. Do a window or 2, go back. Do a doorway, go back. do a tree, then do a window. There's not going to be any specific order that you have to do things. I'm going to go back and work on windows, and I'm going to work on windows on the other side. Then I'll be doing more detail in the church. So now it's kind of watch the video, do what I do. Or if you want to watch the entire video, then you're going to know what you have to do and you can hop all around. Now after I get so much color in on my church, I want to make that look like it's very old and weathered. So I'm going to dry brush with some watered down black down the building vertically, just to show the oldness, the weathered brick on this building. Don't get too dark. It's watered down black. Tap your brush on a paper towel. That'll take off a lot of the excess water and it'll make your dry brushing work better. And I'm just dragging it down vertically, the front part of the building, both the front and the smaller side sections, but the fronts of them. If you want a bigger section, then you don't have to dry brush it. I wanted a bigger section there, so I just painted it in, but then I will dry brush the rest of it. Now, even though I have some windows and things to do, I'm going to go back now and put some shadows on that vertical drop of the sidewalk where my boats are. So I'm using watered down black and I'm shadowing only the vertical drop, not the other part of the sidewalk, not the flat part of the sidewalk you walk on. This is just the vertical drop of the sidewalk. In between the boats, because there's no light getting in there, I'm filling that in with some watered down black. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. But now I'm going to follow my picture because there are some sections, well actually the whole vertical drop gets shadowed on the left-hand side, but not the whole sidewalk. So you want to make sure that when you do shadow that sidewalk, you leave those specific shapes unshadowed. That adds to the interest of this picture. The odd-shaped shadows. Still painting in some boat colors and some detail colors, but as with all of my paintings, I start to get a little bit anxious to do different things. So I'm going to leave those because it really doesn't matter when I paint that kind of stuff in, and I'm going to start to paint some of my posts. These are the posts that they tie their boats to. I'm using umber mixed with some black. You want to make sure that you get them painted straight. They don't have to be vertically straight, but you don't want to have crookedness to the actual post. They can be tilted, but they still have to be straight. This is umber mixed with some black. Painted a few of those. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to do another tree. I'm hopping all over the place. You can see that on the right-hand side, I still have all my windows to do. It's okay to hop around and do that because you're not going to be doing, you're not going to have to do anything in a specific order now. That doesn't mean, there's some things that we're going to shadow. Of course, you don't want to shadow before you get things painted in, but there's not going to be any order. So if you don't want to paint all your windows all at one time, you don't have to. If you don't want to do all of the detail in your boats at one time, you don't have to. If you don't want to paint all 3 trees at one time, you don't have to. The only thing that you have to do in order is to get things painted before you put shadows on. Now that my trees are done, now I'll go to the other side and do some windows. It doesn't take as long as you think to do this picture, especially if you're hopping all over the place and you're doing different things. However, you have the luxury of time with this picture because it's not like you have to paint a certain amount before it dries. You could paint 2 windows, allow them to dry, and not come back to the other windows until the next day if you want. You have the luxury of time with this painting. And now that I've hopped all over the place, windows, trees, tree trunks, posts, I want to put the reflection in the water just from this one post. The other posts won't get reflections because the boats are in the way. But this one you can do a reflection in the water. And then otherwise your water is finished. We're not going back to the water unless you need to deepen something or add something. But it's pretty much going to be finished. The water. We still have windows to do, we have an awning to do, and then we have all of our shadowing to do. The people create shadows on the sidewalk. The church is creating a shadow on the sidewalk. The buildings on the left have created a big shadow on the sidewalk. So that will come after we get all of our initial paint colors down. So just follow your video, follow your picture, continue to paint in all of your little details. The sides to those little Extra sections on the roof, the little attic sections, I wet those, painted them with a little bit of black at the base and allowed that to blend up into the water because really just the base is the darkest. I painted the piping, the gutters. Again, a lot of little detail, and you just want to follow your picture for all of that detail. Some of the detail you may choose to put in, some of the detail you may choose not to put in. It's entirely up to you how detailed you want to get with your painting. But you want to make sure that you're referring to your picture also, because there's some things in the video that go pretty quickly, and I don't want you to miss anything. So do refer to your picture also. Starting to put in some shadows in the doorways. There's darker shadows because it's going into the building, so it's creating some darkness in those doorways. There'll be some black areas added to the windows that shows some of the depth to the window from the outside going towards the inside. You want to get all of those little lines of black also. Shadows under the little window sills. All of this little detail just adds to the picture. Painted my roof in. I'm going to be adding shadows to that awning. The shadows are just showing you where the awning material is flapping or overlapped, but it adds to the movement of the picture. You can tell it's windy because of the shadows that you're putting in. Little lines of detail. Again, I'm following my picture. I wouldn't even think to do half of these things on my own. It wouldn't even thinking about it, I wouldn't think to put in a shadow in some places. But looking at the picture, that's why the picture is so beneficial for you. It will remind you. It will tell you where you need a shadow. It will tell you where you need a darkened doorway. It will tell you how the window looks and where the darkness needs to come. Your pictures are very important. Now I'm going to start to put in the shadows from those posts. Those shadows extend over to the sidewalk, and they also extend down vertically on some of those posts that the sun is shining on, and they extend vertically on the cement going down towards the water. Follow your picture for that. You'll see exactly where those shadows should be. Before you start to put in this big shadow on your left, You want to make sure that you have enough shadow color mixed, so you don't have to go in and remix color, because you may get a wash back if you don't have the correct amount of paint versus water. So mix a bigger puddle so you have enough. I have a little bit of a tree showing there on the right, so I'm painting in some sap. And I'm getting very close to the end of this painting. All your little detail now, your shadowed part of your boats, follow your picture. There are a lot of parts on your boat that are shadowed. You want to make sure you get them shadowed in, watered down black, nothing too dark on your boats, except for like the underside of your boats. They of course have a little bit more of a shadow, but you want to get those all shadowed in. Follow your picture. It'll show you exactly where your shadowing needs to be. We are almost there. Any little lines, I used my really fine liner, did some lines around some of the window panes, some little lines around windows, little lines under piping, little lines along the tops of my boats, little ropes on my boats possibly, but I did that with just my real fine little liner. Colored in my people, no detail to your people, no eyelashes or lips or ears. They're so far away, they're just little bits of color here and there. But it's important you get the shadows for those people on the sidewalk. And you're done. Great painting. Back to Europe. Europe paintings are always great. My friend Ron, he's a great guy for these paintings. Happy painting.